For the better part of a century, the US dollar has been the unshakable foundation of the global financial system. But right now, that foundation is being tested by two massive converging forces. One is a quiet rebellion from the outside, a coalition of powerful nations building an alternative. The other is a crisis from within, an empire of debt that's reaching a critical tipping point. Here at MacroSyntax, our entire focus is connecting the dots on these world-altering shifts. So let's break down exactly what's happening on these two fronts and what it means for the future. So what's really going on here? Is the system being methodically dismantled by its rivals in a kind of controlled demolition? Or is it simply collapsing under the immense weight of its own promises and obligations? The answer to that question is going to define the economic landscape for generations to come. Okay, let's start with that first front, the external challenge. What we're seeing is nothing short of a golden rebellion, a deliberate, strategic move by a bloc of nations to distance themselves from the dollar. And the scale of this, it is just staggering. We're talking about an accumulation of over 6,000 tons of gold by the BRICS nations. Now, this isn't just your normal market activity. This is a coordinated, strategic acquisition of the oldest and most trusted monetary asset on the planet. You see quotes like this popping up everywhere, and it really captures the growing feeling in the markets. For a lot of people watching this unprecedented gold rush is a 5-alarm fire. A signal that a real challenge to the dollar's throne is not just coming, it's already here. And look, this isn't just one or two disgruntled countries. We're talking about a growing coalition. The original BRICS nations have been joined by major energy players like the UAE and Iran. And their strategy is crystal clear. Build a financial architecture that doesn't depend on the US dollar. It's about insulating themselves from American policy and sanctions. With Russia and China leading the charge, their combined gold reserves are now a major force on the world stage. But, and this is absolutely crucial, the biggest threat to the dollar might not be coming from the outside at all. We have to turn our focus inward, to the second front of this war, America's own internal fiscal crisis, an empire of debt. And this isn't some far-off theoretical problem. Just look at the official numbers from the Congressional Budget Office. The U.S. is on a path to hit federal debt of 166% of GDP. And what's driving it is this vicious feedback loop. More borrowing leads to higher interest payments, which then forces even more borrowing. To really grasp how serious this is, there's a historical rule of thumb we can look at. The historian Niall Ferguson pointed out a pattern. Great powers, empires, they begin to falter when the money they spend just paying interest on their debt overtakes their entire budget for national defense. It's a kind of historical red line. And this is the moment that should give everyone pause. That threshold, it's not some distant future possibility. The United States just crossed it. In 2024, for the very first time, the cost to service the national debt was greater than the entire defense budget. And the projections show that gap is only going to get wider. This is a profound sign of structural weakness. So you have this external rebellion and this spiraling internal crisis. And you have to ask yourself, how is this whole thing still standing? How can the system be so fragile and yet somehow so resilient? Well, the answer lies in a strange paradox right at the very heart of the dollar system. You could call it the dollar's superpower. It's known as the exorbitant privilege. Because the entire world needs dollars to trade, to save, to do business, there is a constant, built-in global demand for U.S. debt. This lets America borrow money way cheaper and sustain debt levels that would instantly bankrupt any other country on Earth. But here's the catch. There's a fatal flaw baked right into that privilege. It's called the Triffin dilemma. You see, for the U.S. to supply enough dollars for the whole world, it has to run massive deficits. It has to spend more than it takes in. But over time, those very same deficits slowly but surely eat away at the world's confidence in the dollar's value. Its greatest strength is also its greatest long-term weakness. This was laid bare decades ago by U.S. Treasury Secretary John Connally. The dollar is our currency and your problem. For half a century, that's been the unspoken rule of global finance. The U.S. runs the deficits, and the rest of the world has to absorb them. The question is, for how much longer? And that brings us right to the heart of the matter today. We're balancing on this tipping point. Is the dollar's privileged position strong enough to hold up against all these pressures? Or is the system finally reaching its breaking point? On the one hand, the arguments for the dollar's staying power are pretty convincing.
U.S. financial markets are the deepest and most liquid in the world. When a crisis hits, money still flows to the dollar for safety. And, maybe most importantly, there's no other single currency ready to take its place. But then, you look at the other side of the ledger. The debt math is simply becoming unsustainable. The de-dollarization coalition is not a fantasy, it's real and it's growing. And every time financial sanctions are used as a weapon, it pushes more countries to look for an exit. To make sense of these global shifts, you really need analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Subscribe to Macro Syntax and press the bell icon for more high-impact, future-focused content.
So, if it's not an overnight collapse, what are we looking at? Well, the most likely outcome isn't a world that's dollar-free, but a world where the dollar is no longer the only option. We are moving into a fragmented, multipolar financial order. And we're already seeing the scaffolding of this new world being built. For international payments, you have China's SIPS system as an alternative to SWIFT. For reserves, central banks are balancing their dollar holdings with huge purchases of gold. And new technologies like blockchain platforms are creating payment rails that bypass the dollar system entirely. So what's the big takeaway here? It's this. The age of the dollar's absolute, unquestioned dominance is coming to an end. It's not going to vanish overnight, but its role is changing. It's becoming less exceptional. In the world that's emerging, the dollar will still be incredibly powerful, but it'll have to compete. The system that has defined the global economy for all of our lives is transforming right before our eyes. The dollar's dominance defined the last century. And we're all left with the critical question: what will define the next?